Welcome to the LOJ Conversions YouTube channel. My name is Steven, and this is my 2009 Infiniti M35. Hey guys, my name is Steven, and this is my 2009 Infiniti M35 sedan. And you might wonder, what the heck did somebody do to an Infiniti M35? And this is my personal vehicle, so I want to walk you through kind of the history of this car, kind of why I chose this car to build in the first place, and everything that's been done to it over the years that I've owned it. Going way back 20 years ago in 2005, my then friend and I went to the International Auto Show in New York with my parents, and I remember going to the Infiniti booth and seeing an M35 or M45 in that booth, sitting in that car, and I just fell in love with it at that point. And I was fresh out of college, not much money, and I knew there was no way I could afford that car, but I told myself, and I told Kathleen that day, that someday I would own one. And years and years and years later, my friend became my fiance, became my wife. I started LOJ Conversions, and I want to say about 9 years ago, I bought this car that you see behind me. This started life as a stock 2009 M35S. And what that basically means, 35 meant it had the 3.5 liter V6, and S meant it was the sport model, which for this particular car is really just different front and rear bumpers and four-wheel steering. Otherwise, everything else is pretty similar to a standard M model that was a non-sport car. The M45 was the exact same car, but had a 4.5 liter V8 instead of a 3.5 liter V6. I specifically wanted a 35, and I wanted an 09 because it was after the mid-cycle refresh. I liked the way the body panels looked on the refreshed car better, and the 3.5 V6 came with the 7-speed auto instead of the 4-speed auto that was behind the V8s. Maybe it was a 5-speed. I'm sure somebody will correct me in the comments. I don't really care. But I bought that car because I knew someday I wanted to LS swap it. I had a vision for what I wanted the car to be, and it was a lot of years of pre-planning and doing other mods to the car while it still had the V6 in it. So the M35, this generation, which in Japan would be a Nissan Seema, or actually a Nissan Fuga, I believe, I'm not sure, one of the two. The suspension on the car essentially shares all of its geometry with a 370Z or even an R35 GTR. And then the drivetrain components all share their mounting with the older 350Z. So a lot of the parts that LOJ developed over the years actually just fit this car because of its commonality with other Nissan platforms. So what I did first is I attacked the wheels and tires and suspension and brakes, because I learned as a young child that if you add power to a vehicle without addressing all those things first, you end up in a lot of trouble. And I learned that the hard way in a bad car wreck, broke my leg in a bunch of places. I'm a guy that learns lessons the hard way sometimes, so I approached this build differently. I started with the wheels, brakes, tires, suspension. The wheel and tire setup is a set of TSWs. I honestly don't remember the model. It's been so many years since they've been on the car, but they're 19 by 9.5 with 285 Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's on them. It's a good amount of grip, a good tire that works in basically all weather other than snow, and this car never sees the snow anyway. It's a fair weather toy for me. The brakes are actually 370Z Akebono brakes, front and rear, with two-piece rotors. But one of the things I did differently, because the whole theme of this build has been subtlety. There's modifications done that you might not pick up on unless you're really looking. The brake calipers, I disassembled the brake calipers, put them in my milling machine to mill the faces flat, had them powder coated, put them back in my CNC machine, and CNC etched the LOJ into the front calipers and the LOJ crest into the rear calipers, reassembled the calipers and installed them on the car. And what you end up is with a big brake package that it's just subtly different from a normal 370Z brake upgrade in a way that really makes it unique and special to me. On the suspension front, because it shares so many suspension components with the 370Z and the R35, I was able to run SP PL spherical bearings in all of the control arms on this to remove any compliance out of the arms. And I actually had a set of Fortunato 500 series coilovers custom built for this car, because the coilover setup on this is unique to this platform. It's close to a 370Z, but not exactly the same. And Fortunato was very kind to work with me in developing a custom setup specifically for this car. Its weight and weight distribution is similar to an R35 GTR, so we went with valving and spring rates that suit that platform. If it works on that car and this shares the geometry, logic would say it should work the same on this car as well. I actually put an R35 GTR Eibach front sway bar on the car and a 370Z Eibach rear sway bar on the car, and that kind of rounds out the suspension upgrades. Again, looking at it, you wouldn't really know that the suspension has been turned up that high in this car, but it actually handles incredibly well for what it is. And when I'm out on track, I have a separate set of wheels and tires that I run with some 200 tread wear aggressive tires when I'm racing the car, doing autocross or road course days or anything like that. As you can imagine, you threw a lot of brakes, a lot of tire, a lot of suspension upgrades at a car that weighs just sub 4,000 pounds and has a paltry 3.5 liter V6 in it. It does a lot of things well except for the go portion. And again, I had been planning an LS swap in this car from day one. So originally I swapped an LS7 into this car with a 6L90 automatic transmission in it. And the reason I went with an automatic is because the car's a factory automatic and it's a weekend toy for me. It's not a race car. If you're familiar with LOJ, I have a Frontier that is my race car. This is a weekend, take the kids to get ice cream, go out with the family to dinner, take to work sometimes, fair weather, and play on an autocross or a HPDE type day, but it's not a race car per se. And it ran with the LS7 and the 6L90 for a couple years. And then we had a customer approach us in the shop that really wanted an LS7 for his build. And LS7s were tough to come by, and they're also known to be a little problematic with valve guide issues and things like that. But the motor that I had in this car was fully gone through by a machine shop and had all of those LS7 problems fixed, and I knew it was a good motor. That LS7 ended up in a customer's car, and we had an LS3 at the shop, and we just swapped in an LS3. So if you're wondering why the badge on the back went from saying M35 to M70, it's because it used to have a 7-liter motor in it, and I just haven't had a chance to change the badge to say M62 at this point. I will at some point, but it's just hasn't gotten done yet. So now the car actually has an LS3 in it, same 6L90 setup. It's a little bit bigger cam. It makes, I think, made 440 wheel on a Mustang dyno, so it's healthy, but it's not crazy. We did run an LSX high ram intake manifold, and I know with the runner length and that intake manifold, I'm giving up some torque down low, but it was really more looking for the aesthetic under the hood than it was necessarily the all-out performance. I could make more power with probably with a factory LS3 intake with this particular combo, but I love the way it looks, and that's what I care about on this particular build. I set up the fuel system in this car to give me plenty of room to grow later. So Radium Engineering makes what they call an in-tank fuel cell surge tank, and basically these cars and all 350Zs, 370s, all of them have a saddle tank for the fuel tank. So it's kind of set up in two bales that the drive shaft goes through the middle, and the factory fuel sending unit has some siphoning magic in it to pull fuel from one side to the other side. But what happens when you go out on track is you can end up with fuel starvation issues because the siphon doesn't pull fuel fast enough. So what Radium came up with was a fuel cell surge tank, and what happens is the side of the tank that doesn't have a pump in it still has a sending unit for the fuel level. You take that sending unit out, this can drops in that side that has two pumps in it, and now the factory pump fills that surge tank. Basically allows you to have much better fuel control when under high cornering loads, and allows you to have dual pumps in the tank, so if you want to make big power later, you can supply plenty of fuel to whatever engine you're running. I still only have one pump hooked up, but there's two pumps in the tank. The idea is that someday this will get a blower. It doesn't have it yet, but the fuel system's set up to accommodate that. So I have the dual pump set up. I have all the fuel lines run, AN hoses from front to rear to allow it to support 1,000+ horsepower. It's not making that now, obviously, but someday in the future, I set the foundation so I can grow later without having to redo any of the work there. I made a custom cold air intake for this intake manifold. It's actually a 4.5-inch intake pipe, which is a little overkill. It's really aesthetic and less restriction. It's running just a blade style LS3 mass air sensor, and because the engine bay is so big in this car, because they had a factory V8 option, I was able to run that air filter right down into the fender well on the driver's side, so it gets fresh cold air. If I look at IATs while driving, it's always basically whatever the ambient temperature is what the engine's seeing, and that's great for making power when you're cruising around in these things. Our 350Z engine mounts, our 350Z transmission mount. The oil pan is unique for this chassis, so we actually sell kits for these cars now, and it's modified versions of 350Z parts or unique parts for this car to make it fit. We run our complete accessory drive setup, which actually allows the Nissan power steering pump, alternator, and AC compressor to bolt to the LS engine, but I get to reuse all the factory wiring and hoses, which makes the conversion a lot more OEM appearing. The fit is better, and it's simpler if you don't have to remake all that stuff. Not only is it running a 6L90 automatic, but the rear differential in these cars is shared architecturally with a host of other Nissan Infiniti platforms, because Nissan does that. There's a lot of commonality. So with the torque of a V8 and this automatic, the factory gearing in this car just really wasn't suited. So we used a taller gear ratio. Believe it or not, it's got a 276 rear gear out of a Q45 sedan. It's a super tall gear, but it's for low cruising RPM. Again, it's a cruiser, not a race car, but it allows the car to ease out of the hole really nicely with that tall gear and first gear in this transmission. And I actually installed a Quaife helical limited slip differential into that factory diff, because it's a Nissan diff, you can buy a Quaife diff for a 350Z and it fits right into the differential from the Q45 that's now installed in an M35. So hodgepodge of parts, but when you understand these platforms and the commonality that Nissan has between all of their cars, you're able to make some magic happen by mixing parts from a bunch of different vehicles. The exhaust is something that I thought was pretty trick. We're running our swap headers, but the exhaust is full dual 2.5 inch, and yes, 2.5, that is to keep it quieter, but I actually ran 5th gen Camaro rear mufflers on it with the bi-mode flaps. And if we back up a little bit to that 6L90 transmission, I actually made the factory Nissan automatic shifter work with the 6L90 trans, and that shifter has park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then when you bump it to the left, you can tap forward and back for manual mode. Well, now when you bump the shifter from the right to the left for manual mode, the flappers open in the exhaust and the car gets louder, and then you can manually shift, again, because with that Caprice operating system, I can shift manually through the gears. One of the magic ingredients to this car is a part called the CAN bus translator. And this car speaks a unique CAN language, different from every other Nissan and Infiniti we've ever worked with, which made it a little tricky getting all the factory gauges and air conditioning and all that to work in the car. But what we did is the CAN bus translator has a distinct input for the switches that occur when you tap up or tap down. It translates that to the CAN language that the trans computer wants to see for upshifts and downshifts, and you basically have manual mode in this car. Even the dash cluster says PRND for park, reverse, neutral, drive. When you bump over to manual mode, instead of saying drive, it now says M and whatever gear you're in, and as you shift, it changes the number on the dash for the gear you're in. I tried to make as many things in this car fit as if that's the way Nissan built it for a car that's swapped. And those little details, like getting those gauges to work, the pernal on the dash to work, the manual mode, keeping the factory shifter. When you sit in the car, you don't really know, there's no evidence at all that it's swapped. And that's something I really shoot for in all of our builds, and this car particularly because it's my own car. The only other thing done in the interior is actually a set of 370Z convertible seats. Why 370Z convertible? Well, I wanted something sporty, but this car was a luxury car. It had factory heated and cooled seats, and ironically enough, a normal 350Z has a heated seat, but a convertible has a heated and cooled seat. So I got convertible seats, and since they were Nissan seats, and Infiniti and Nissan are the same company, it was easy to integrate the wiring with those seats into this car. I had to make custom rails and custom mounts to get them to fit, but it gave me a sportier seat that kind of is really incognito in the interior. You wouldn't even know it's changed until you look at it, but it's a really more sporty, comfortable place to sit that still gives you the luxury features of heated and cooled. On the exterior, exterior, this is original 16-year-old paint. This car's a 2009. It did originally come from Arizona, and when I was shopping for one of these cars, I looked for a Southern car, no rust, clean, one owner. I paid accordingly for it, but I got what I wanted. And the car's super clean, but one of the things that these cars have is all of the factory trim, the door molding, the window trim, the windshield trim, the grille, it's all chrome from the factory. We actually used a brushed aluminum vinyl wrap to wrap all of the trim to like a brushed black aluminum instead of the chrome look. It's still a contrasting color to the gloss black paint, but it just makes it look a lot more sleek, a lot sportier in my opinion. I'm kind of trying to build a little bit of a baby CTS here, like a CTSV. It's a big body luxury sedan, but it's got performance cred now, and that's one of the things I really like about it. So the last aspect of these builds that we always try to hit on is cooling. So anytime you're putting more horsepower in a car than it came with from stock, chances are the factory radiator is not going to be able to keep up with the cooling demands. So that's one of the things we address with all of our conversions. And this car, actually from the factory, has dual pulse width modulated electric fans. And we were able to use the CAN bus translator from the ECU to translate the CAN fan control from the factory ECU into the CAN language that the Nissan power distribution module wants to see, so that we can keep the factory fans with an upgraded radiator. So the radiator itself is made by C&R Racing. They make all of our radiators for all of our conversions, but it utilizes the factory fans because there's so much room in this engine bay you can, and the more factory parts you can reuse, the better. But the cooling capacity of that radiator is much higher than the factory radiator. In addition, I installed a thermostatic oil cooler, or a thermostatic oil filter relocation for the oil filter on the engine, which then feeds a large front-mounted engine oil cooler. There's also a thermostatic takeoff block on the side of the transmission. Both of those thermostat setups are from Improved Racing, which they make some fantastic oil parts for LS and universal applications. I love their stuff. So there's a thermostat built into the takeoff block on the side of the 6L90 so that you don't overcool the transmission. An interesting fact about those transmissions is they won't start their internal learning mode for shift firmness and things like that until they're up to a certain temperature. So if you put a straight cooler on without any kind of thermostatic control, and it's a huge cooler, the transmission might never actually start internally learning. It'll work on whatever base program is in it, but it won't adapt the way they're actually designed to from the factory. So by putting a thermostat on it, it allows the transmission temp to get up to operating temp quicker so it can learn faster. Again, all of those coolers were added to allow the car to go out on track and live, even though that wasn't the intended purpose. It's a bit overbuilt, so when I want to come to an event like where we're at this weekend, I can take the car out and be confident that I'm not going to melt it down. And that about wraps it up on this car. As I said, this is a car I've been working on over the course of 9 years. It's gone through many iterations. This is where it sits right now. If I did this video again a year from now, it'll probably be different. That's the nature of having project cars, and especially when they're your personal vehicle, you're always constantly tweaking little things. Makes you think that you got plans for it, and I do. I have a Magnuson 2650 supercharger sitting at home that has been collecting dust on a shelf for over a year. It will end up on this car eventually, and we're considering doing a vinyl wrap. I know you'd say, why? The black is beautiful, and the black is beautiful, but I've been looking at a black car for 9 years now, and we want to do something different. I have a little bit of an infatuation with specific Nissan OEM colors, and two of my favorites are Millennium Jade, which is like this really light green color that actually will kind of chameleon change a little bit in different lighting. And then there's actual Midnight Purple, which is like a really deep purple that turns black in the dark. Those are probably my two favorite Nissan colors. No surprise, they're both like Skyline GTR colors, but it's probably gonna end up being Millennium Jade the same time the engine and blower go on it, but we'll see. And maybe a year from now, we'll shoot an update video and we'll show you all the things that changed in that time. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's more of an oddball build, and that's a lot of the stuff we do at LOJ Conversions is a little bit of the weird stuff, the oddball stuff. But I really love this car. My kids love going out for ice cream and dinner in it. My wife tolerates riding in it.